Hi, you're watching Ask Brother Brad. You got Bible questions, we got Bible answers. My name is Levi. This is Brother Brad. Last week, Brother Brad, somebody wrote in and asked the question, how do I deal with a spouse that's not as spiritual as I think they should be? This week, we're going to talk about in more in depth and more detail how to deal with that situation.
Excellent. And it's a good question that needs to be answered. I believe last week I kind of left him hanging a little bit. I just kind of gave him the eternal perspective idea, but I didn't go into how to have the eternal perspective. And that's what I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. But let me just reiterate what I talked about a little bit last week, and that is, God promised us in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 28 that if we got married, we would have trouble in the flesh. Why are we surprised when we have it? God already promised we'd have it if we got married. He not only promised we'd have trouble in the flesh after we got married, he promised we'd have trouble in the world being a Christian. So temporal drama is always going to be a part of our life. So why are spouses surprised when temporal drama comes into their life through their other spouse not being quote unquote as spiritual? It's just temporal drama. So the whole idea is, how do you counter the temporal drama that comes into your life? How do you minimize it? And that's what I want to take a moment and explain so that you can actually do it. In my reference work in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul talked about what it means to be eternally minded versus temporal minded. And he talked about how to fix this thing called being eternally minded. And so what he said to us, he says that what we need to do is get the eternal perspective. You have to gain the eternal perspective in order to minimize temporal drama in your life. And once you gain it, you have to maintain it. And so there's only two ways to gain the eternal perspective, and this is what I want you to know. And that is by understanding heaven, because heaven is eternal, and understanding what heaven thinks. Now, the way you understand what heaven thinks is by understanding parables. And there's 41 of them just in the New Testament. You understand what heaven thinks by understanding parables. You understand heaven by understanding the truths of heaven. Now, once you understand those 7 truths concerning heaven, you begin to gain the eternal perspective. But now wait a minute, just gaining the eternal perspective doesn't mean you maintain the eternal perspective. And so, for example, the first point that I list here in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 17 and 18 is that heaven is a real place. Now, if heaven is a real place, and it is, because the Bible says it is, then ought we not invest in it while we're here? See, that's the application. See, you can believe that heaven is a real place because the Bible talks about it, and that will help you to gain the eternal perspective. But in order to maintain that point, you have to invest in it. Well, how do you invest in the fact that heaven is a real place? By investing the 3 things that God asked us to invest in, which is time, talent, and the tithe. If you and I will take our time and invest it for God, take the talents God's given us once we got saved and invest it in God's work, and then take the tithe and invest it, then we will be practicing what we've gained. We'll be maintaining what we gained. And so the whole idea behind temporal drama versus the eternal perspective is learning to gain the eternal perspective by understanding heaven and understanding what heaven thinks.
I think that's very important. I think also, you'll probably get into it a little bit later, is not only do we need to understand that heaven is a real place, but I think you make the point in your reference Bible that heaven is a better place. And a lot of times we think that we need our way right here, right now, and we get so consumed with having our way right here, right now, that we forget about, well, something is better waiting for us in heaven. Like, who cares if we get our way right now, right here, right now? And I think like a perfect illustration is that our staff here at Harvest Bible Church. We have a lot of strong personalities in our staff.
Yes, we do.
But we all get along great because we realize that right here, right now isn't as important as there and then.
Exactly, because heaven is a better place. And that's the second truth concerning heaven. There's 7 truths concerning heaven, which will help you to gain the eternal perspective. That's the second one. There's 5 more. We're not going to go into them tonight. But if we would learn to realize that this isn't it, everything that we experience here is just temporal. This is not the eternal perspective. The eternal perspective is something you and I have to gain. Paul said that he himself in 2 Corinthians 4:17, that everything to him was but a light affliction. Now you think about that statement. Here's the Apostle Paul, who was scourged 5 times. What Jesus went through once, he went through 5 times, and he said, it's nothing but a light affliction. No big deal. No big deal. I can't even understand it. That's because he didn't let the temporal drama that God promised would come into everybody's life affect him.
I think you look at it, what he went through here on earth was nothing in compared to what he was going to gain in heaven.
Well, absolutely. And that's the eternal perspective.
No-
But you can't only gain the eternal perspective, you have to maintain it, and that's where a lot of Christians fail. Because what happens is they begin to gain the eternal perspective by understanding heaven and what heaven thinks, but they never maintain it because some other temporal drama will come along. And because they don't maintain what they've gained, they lose it. And all of a sudden they're focused on, my spouse isn't as spiritual as they should be. Well, that's all temporal drama. If you would focus on the eternal perspective, that temporal drama that your spouse is taking you through will be greatly minimized because you're maintaining what you gained in understanding heaven and what heaven thinks.
That's awesome information.
They can get the rest of it.
And if you would like the other 5 points, we'll put a link to where you can get Brother Brad's reference Bible.
Or we can put those 7 ways for the folks on the link.
Hey, we'll put it in the description.
There you go.
If you like this video, be sure and like the video and share with your friends. We'll see you next time on Ask Brother Brad.